So what is the end game? The end game is polio free. And that means no wild polioviruses, no vaccine-derived polioviruses, and no VAP cases. Basically, when the term eradication is used, it tends to refer to the 3 wild viruses. And when the end game is used, it also means the vaccine viruses as well. And there are 4 components to the end game. And forget the timelines because we've not really met all of the timelines. The first is to get rid of wild poliovirus. We've done it for type 2. We have probably done it for type 3, but we have not done it for type 1. We also want to get rid of the CVDPVs. We've only seen type 2 recently, focally distributed at this point to DRC and Syria. We need to get rid of them. The second objective is to strengthen immunization systems. And this includes building and improving routine delivery of immunization and adding a dose of an activated polio vaccine into every immunization schedule to provide insurance against emergence of type 2 and to hasten eradication of types 1 and 3, and eventually to provide insurance once we've got rid of type 3 for some period. A third objective is containment. I mentioned that the last case of naturally occurring smallpox had rash onset October 26, 1977 in Merka, Somalia. The last 2 cases of smallpox actually had onset in the UK in 1978 as a result of a laboratory break in containment. So what we need to do is destroy as many of the viruses as possible, and where we have the viruses, have them operate under special conditions of containment so that we don't reintroduce the virus. And the fourth objective of the plan is legacy planning. It is to basically, we've got so much learning, so many resources, so many people trained, let's not lose them. Let's divert them to other major public health problems so we gain that expertise. One of the greatest miracles, in my opinion, was the switch. This was the removal of the type 2 component from trivalent vaccine because it caused more than 90% of the circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses, a quarter to a third of the VAP cases, and it interfered with the immune response to types 1 and 3. And within a 2-week period, at the end of April of 2016, 155 countries replaced TOPV with BOPV. It was a globally synchronized switch. It was, in a sense, the world uniting against a common enemy, the type 2 polio virus. And TOPV will not be used. And we are now using BOPV and IPV. And the only way we use MOPV2 is when we detect outbreaks of type 2 CVDPVs, which we hope to get rid of. This just shows you some of the things that went into the switch, pre-positioning BOPV in Ghana, in activating the TOPV before burial in Nigeria, and collecting TOPV for disposal in Kenya. So what are some of the barriers to eradication? Probably the #1 barrier is insecurity. We have places, for example, in Pakistan and Borno, Nigeria, where vaccinators are being killed. And we have to find ways to work with religious authorities and others to get into these areas and gain access. Vaccine in the vial is 0% effective. And we've had some successful approaches. Building successful political will and strong ownership from the national level. When I was at the Gates Foundation, I visited with Bill Gates, Goodluck Jonathan, who was president of Nigeria at the time. They developed an emergency operations center which played a major role in preventing the spread of Ebola in Nigeria. Developing partnerships, and one of the biggest groups has been the Islamic Advisory Group with the Jeddah Declaration, again, to overcome some of the resistance. Community mobilization, trying to include people in the affected areas so that it's not strangers coming in, town announcers, street theater groups, and others. Quality improvement, having continued independent monitoring has been critical to avoid corruption and also to improve performance. Adding in special independent monitoring boards at the global level also to change policy, and getting the funding that is needed to support, for example, IPV introduction. So what are some of the endgame risks? One is reintroduction of wild viruses. I mentioned that we have had breaks in containment in both the Netherlands and Belgium in recent years. Fortunately, they didn't go anywhere, but this is something that we have to be careful of. Break in containment from laboratories. There may be laboratories around the world that have viruses, and there is the potential for bioterrorism and an intentional release, although polio would make a terrible biowarfare weapon since so few people who are infected are actually paralyzed. Circulating vaccine-derived polio viruses are a problem, as in Syria. Continued use of OPV is a problem. We have to get rid of OPV. And then we have very rarely a group of immune deficient persons with B-cell immune defects, severe ones, who are chronic shedders and could reseed the population. Most of these people in the poorest of developing countries die, so they are not shedders, but they may be shedders in more medium income countries. So what is being done to mitigate the risks? Destroy and document wild poliovirus 2 and OPV2 materials, transfer them to what is called a polio essential facility, which must meet certain criteria, including operating biosafety level 3. Stop OPV use. We've done it with type 2. We'll eventually need to do it with types 1 and 3, and stop it at a time at a high population immunity. Implement at least one dose of IPV use globally to reduce the risks of OPV2 cessation and to boost immunity against types 1 and 3, and then continued IPV, at least 2 doses for at least 10 years before total OPV withdrawal, to provide an insurance policy against reemergence. There are efforts to develop new tools, monovalent tools, easier ways to administer IPV, such as microneedle or microarray patches, ways of decreasing the cost, such as intradermal administration using 1/5 of the dose, adding adjuvants to increase the immunogenicity, to improve, decrease the amount of antigen needed, decrease the cost, to develop genetically stable OPVs that don't mutate and become neurovirulent and transmissible like CVDPVs, and also to add adjuvants potentially to IPV that will enhance its intestinal immunogenicity. There are efforts to develop better tools for surveillance so that you can test with PCR in the fields, more environmental surveillance, and for those immune deficient chronic shedders, antiviral drugs. There is major effort for legacy and transition planning of the global initiative. For example, you're in Nepal here, but Nepal's polio eradication program has reported using the resources from measles, rubella, neonatal tetanus, and Japanese encephalitis. And certainly you know more about it than I do. We need to secure funding. What you can see here is a study done by the Boston Consulting Group in 2016 that polio workers in Africa spent about half of their time on polio, about a fifth of their time on routine immunization, about 8% on measles, and the rest on other things. We can't lose this workforce. We need to find ways of funding them and then redirecting them to other projects. And this is the polio laboratory showing how big a resource it is with the stars. We now use it for measles, and we can use it for other things. We need to find resources to save it.